Okay, can everybody hear me? All right, thank you for coming out today. I'm really excited about this panel. I think we have what looks to be a really interesting and good discussion, hopefully something that will also lead to some change. First thing I want to do is give some acknowledgments to all the people who have helped out in this report. Go Big Read and the Department of Urban and Regional Planning for sponsoring this event. Also, obviously want to thank Tenant Resource Center, without whose support we would not be able to do this research. And all the people and organizations that we met with, State Representative Chris Taylor, Matt Walker from the Department of Planning and Community and Economic Development, the Bayview Foundation, Commonwealth Development, Community Action Coalition for South Central Wisconsin, Independent Living, Moving Out, Port St. Vincent de Paul, Stonehouse Development, the Road Home, Dane County, UW-Madison. And of course, I would be remiss if I did not also acknowledge my co-authors on this report, the students in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning, Ian, Lexa, Emily, Rwanda, Sheila, and Taylor. They put in a tremendous amount of work. So I want to thank them for all of their effort and labor toward this end. Really briefly, I want to go over the program for today. We're going to go over very briefly the major findings, the things I think are really important that come from this report, as well as then we'll jump right into a panel discussion. I have questions for our panelists, and then we'll open it up in the last 30 minutes for Q&A. So if you folks have questions or want to ask the panelists something, this will be the time. So just ask that we hold all of our questions toward that period, if you don't mind. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panel and then jump into the major findings, and then we'll start a conversation. To my right, we have Mitch. Mitch is the Associate Clinical Professor here at the Law School, where he has served as the Director of the Neighborhood Law Clinic for the last 8 years. In the Neighborhood Law Clinic, Mitch trains and supervises law students who represent actual clients in and around Dane County in rental housing cases, including evictions. Prior to joining the clinical faculty, Mitch co-founded Community Justice Incorporated, a nonprofit law firm in Madison that has provided representation to individuals using a sliding fee scale model for the last 12 years. Brenda Konkel. Brenda is the Executive Director of the Tenant Resource Center since 1995 and has worked at the Tenant Resource Center or been on the Board of Directors since 1991. Among other things, she served on the City Council from 2001 to 2009. Was instrumental in helping Occupy Madison create their tiny house village, is a local government activist, blogger, and has a regular local government segment on Work Community Radio. I highly recommend this piece, that's all the good information. Heidi Whitleitner, I'm always struggling with that. I said it okay. Heidi is a staff attorney at Legal Action of Wisconsin, Madison's office, where she's been specializing in eviction defense and subsidized housing law for over 10 years. She represents District 2 on the Dane County Board of Supervisors and serves on the board of Homeless Services Consortium of Dane County and many other local boards and committees grappling with homelessness and poverty in our community. Finally, Robert Dick is the Executive Director of Dane County Housing Authority and has been working in real estate and property management since 1995. He's been an active member in the delegation to create economic stability for young families, the Affordable Housing Action Alliance, the Fur Oaks Housing Providers Group, the Leopold Area Resource Committee, and the Apartment Association for South Central Wisconsin. Robert has won a number of awards for his work, including the Property of the Year by the Apartment Association of South Central Wisconsin in 2006, for the successful rehabilitation of the Pines Apartments in Fitchburg. Also the Visionary of the Year Award by Emphasis Software in 2012 for his efforts to reposition Dane County Housing Authority. So with, maybe we could have I guess a welcome for our panelists. There is a lot of stuff in this report, and I want to say a few things about the data and the findings before we jump into it. The first thing is that this is an action research project. What that means is that is about opening the door to issues that are important for resolving. This was done in collaboration with the Tenant Resource Center, organization that through the years has been compiling data on evictions through their work. This is something that, in our conversations, Brenda and I have talked about, that she's sort of been hoping that somebody would take this data and do something with it. They run the mediation court in Dane County, and they send out mailers to people who are have an eviction case against them or filing, and that's how we got this data. So it really is it represents the work of 15 years of lots of labor going into putting that data in every single week and sending out those mailers to folks who are facing eviction. So without that work, none of this would have been possible. I study evictions, and it's my understanding that this represents probably the most extensive database on evictions that exists in the entire country. I know no other eviction database that is large and comprehensive as the one that the TRC has been putting together over the years. So yeah. And as I said, this is really about opening the door. There's a lot of information here, questions that arise from this report that are worthy of further investigation. And we are hoping that this report really pushes those doors open and encourages further study, further research, more investigation around this question, because there are lots of important issues to be resolved. This data represents, again, it's what we analyzed was eviction filings from 2000 to 2015 and in Dane County. The data also is important to note is eviction filings. These is not necessarily things that ended in eviction or an eviction determination. This is just the beginning of the eviction process. Again, that's because TRC sends out mailers to people who are facing eviction so they can show up in eviction mediation court. The other thing to take note of is this data is not normalized, so it's not divided by the number of housing units, the total population, for example. This is just straight up aggregate eviction totals based on the block groups. So those of you who may not be familiar, block group is a term that the census uses. It's a unit roughly from 600 to 3,000 people. It's the way that they divide up areas. It's one of the smallest units of analysis that the census provides, and so it's a good sort of proxy for a neighborhood. So when you hear me say neighborhood, or in the report when they say neighborhood, what we really are talking about are block groups, but it's sort of a rough proxy. It's not exactly the best measurement for a neighborhood, but it's what we got. Okay, so here are I think the four major findings that I want to address briefly. The first is that race is the most important factor for understanding evictions in Dane County. And I'm going to go over these in a little bit more detail in a second. So, income alone does not explain the eviction patterns in Dane County, and a small group of plaintiffs, around 100 or so, account for a majority, 53%, 52% of eviction cases since 2000. And subsidized housing providers are among some of the top eviction plaintiffs. This is, if you don't mind, I'm going to step over here real quick just so I can see what I'm looking at. This is a table that's in the report about race. And what it does is it divides up all these block groups that we have in Dane County based off of the percent non-white. So it's ranked here. This neighborhood, Bram's Addition, is the most non-white neighborhood in Dane County. Right here we see the number of evictions, again from 2000 to 2015. And then the rank. Where does this rank? What we see here is one of the important findings is that some of the most non-white neighborhoods in Dane County are also among the highest in terms of the number of evictions. We can see here that this Southdale East Badger Road is number one. It has over 1,200 eviction filings. Leopold, Dunn's Marsh, Fitchburg, Cahill, Maine, right there at Caddis Bend, are all among the top eviction neighborhoods in Dane County. This is something, this just shows the top 10. It's important to note for folks who are sort of into numbers here, the correlation across all of Dane County is fairly high. It means that there's a very strong relationship between eviction filings and non-white neighborhoods. So that the more non-white the neighborhood becomes, the more eviction filings there are. This is another one of our findings that has to do with income. Very common in eviction research to see that income is correlated with eviction, so that we understand that most eviction filings or most eviction cases are for non-payment of rent. And that's pretty much a proxy for low-income families who are struggling to pay rent month to month and may face eviction because they are unable to do so. In Madison, it's a really unique situation because of the university plays such a big role in the housing market. We see that a lot of this is again the top 10 low-income neighborhoods in Dane County. And as you'll see here, they are all located right around campus. So what are we looking at here is basically student housing. This is, again, speaking of that door that we need to open up for future research, is a way to separate these students out to really get a sense of the low-income population and its effect on eviction, because just by this sort of first stab at the data, it's not coming up, and that's just because we're seeing students represented. We're also seeing them as fairly low on the ranking of eviction. And the eviction cases are sort of at or above or just below average for every block group in the county. So there's a couple things to take from this. Is that students generally can access income outside of their household, right? Their families or whatnot. So they may not be facing eviction for non-payment of rent, whereas other similar groups at similar income levels may. Another really important finding is that there's a small group of plaintiffs are responsible for a majority of the eviction cases. This is a couple graphs are superimposed on each other, but one is this table right here. This is the top evictors, and take the top 2, the top 10. You can see the number of cases and the percent of all. What we see here is that 2 plaintiffs represent 7% of all the eviction filings from 2000 to 2015. These 2 are Madison Property Management and Wisconsin Management Company. It's important to note when looking at this or thinking about this that these are management companies that manage lots of units. So one of the things that's really important for us to understand, again, sort of opening up that door to future research, is how many units do these management companies operate and manage. One of the things that will come up on the next slide is that Wisconsin Management Company also manages subsidized housing. So this is another issue for us that we'd like to explore further as we move forwards. These units that are subsidized, that receive subsidies and are targeted at special populations. This is a management company that's working in sort of all sectors of the market, private for-market rental units as well as subsidized units. What are the differences with their eviction policies when they're dealing with different populations? That brings us to the last point here, which is that subsidized housing providers are among some of the top eviction plaintiffs. This is an issue, obviously, that has to do with special populations. Some of these folks, like Porchlight right here, rates number 16, they house a number of very vulnerable populations that require lots of assistance. So there's, on one level, you say things kind of make sense that they might be among the top evictors. However, from a community perspective, where we're trying to seek a way to house some of our most vulnerable populations and deal with all the myriad of issues that may come into the household, it raises the issue of what kind of policies these subsidized housing providers or the management companies that manage these properties have, and how are they dealing with eviction and displacement. So those, I think, are the main findings. I have more detail included in this presentation for later in case questions arise. I'm anticipating a couple, so I'll come back to those later. We can come back to these slides if you have questions. But really what I want to do right now is turn it over to our panel. We do have some experts that in the house that deal with this every day. So I have some questions for each of them, and they're open to anybody. So if anybody would like to respond, this is open. But I'll just go ahead and start it off.